When we spoke for Damsel in 2018, you said your humor comes through the situations you put the characters in, like the physical and situational comedy. Like the reality of the characters are facing is what ultimately makes it comical. One, was it more creatively freeing for you to strip away spoken language as we know it today to look for the comedy as well as the other emotions through the Sasquatch reality? And two, how the hell did you do it? Do you go through all the motions like the characters do in the story, or do you feel it out on the day with the company you have? Because it all feels highly specific to a culture and the environment that they're in.
Oh, that's a great yeah, that's those are great questions and observations. I think from the start wanted to just be willing to embrace the full spectrum of their behavior, and like everything we do is kind of a mix of comedy and pathos, but I think what dictates that it's a very intuitive process. It's never forced. It's just kind of like
Mm,
if if whatever feels most truthful in that situation, has just yeah, whatever feels the most truthful, I think, to us, and that kind of dictates if it's leaning a little more towards poignant or a little or more on the humorous side. And with this, we it was the case with this film as much as anything else we've done, but it was kind of in bigger extremes because they were not human. Um, it was like essential, like the most important thing with in the script and writing the script was to make them relatable on a human level and to kind of see ourselves in them. And so that meant being open to whichever way that went in terms of their behavior, and there's the broadest, most slapstick kind of thing written in a lot of ways. But then it was in equal measure the other extreme with the more poignant moments. And even though the film has like a rich score and sound design, and they have their own vocalizations throughout in the way in terms of their communication. It was it was almost approaching in a silent film in terms of how you advance the narrative, because we didn't have the benefit of dialogue to move the exposition to convey the story. And so it was through their physicality, through the shot choices, and through the subtlest gestures, with their eyes,
right.
that we told the story.
Yeah. Does tapping into that simplicity of the Sasquatch life, I know there's complexity within it, but compared to our life, does it change the trajectory of your own life in any capacity or the creative decisions you will make going forward? Or was it more or less like a fun, like duck out of our reality and now you're locked into the next thing?
I don't know. It's very cathartic writing it. It was also maybe the most fun I've ever had writing something because it was so free. Because you could approach these characters without judgment or shame, and and it's just like pure id, in a lot of ways. And because their needs are they're on one hand they're very straightforward, just survival, connection, that sort of thing. It was very the narrative was very clear, but also I don't know, then finding the way like the way finding ways to see ourselves in those creatures and make it relatable was I don't know, really fun and cathartic. I think so much of what we do, we love shooting outdoors and love being in nature. And I mean, so many of our films are shot, in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness. And this one was, exclusively so. So I think just always been interested in humans' connection to the natural world, and this was kind of, just taking it to an extreme.
Right, right. What was funny to me going into this, being familiar with your work, is how I knew that some stuff, for lack of a better word, was going to go down in this, no matter how these characters worked to shape things. I feel like your creative work could best be encapsulated in that, and I think we discussed this before in Robert Forster's line in Damsel, where he talks about things being terrible and new and fascinating ways on the other side of something. If it doesn't give anything away too much, did you have the more offbeat or hard-hitting beats in mind, or did they surface naturally when they were kind of going through the journey, when you were going through the journey with these characters? Like, is there, I know you said that a lot of it's intuitive, but is there any sort of strategy in place for determining like when it feels right to back a character in a corner or remove the comfortability for a viewer?
Well, yeah, it was the script was there was very little improv with the filming itself. The beats were all really specific. I'm trying to think in terms of the writing, always knew the general trajectory was going on and always wanted to use the structure of four seasons as a framework, because we needed if we I think we needed some kind of something to anchor the film with like structurally but then also didn't want it to be like a timetable created by humans, so it seemed like the four seasons were kind of a perfect way um to do that. But I don't know, something like the road sequence or things like that, it's just
Yeah,
I don't know. It I knew generally where it wanted to go, but then it just kind of like it was like, some scripts are really difficult and some things just kind of pour out of me. And this one, it was just it was kind of telling me what to write. I felt like as I was going. It felt like there was, when you got to certain points in the story, like the road, it was like there was no other way for it to go.
right,
And we, and knew and I think as long as, even though I had these certain like milestones wanted to check, then so it wasn't like unwieldy in writing it, but it was it was so it was within that it just felt, I don't know, there wasn't a lot of deliberation in writing it, like in terms of their character arcs. I think maybe because they're such straightforward in terms of their basic needs.
right, right. Speaking of things that feel right, I love all the Kubrick vibes here. Of course, there's, the apes in 2001, but also there's a point when something is shown on a tree and the zoom you have on it feels like you're shooting the monolith in
Yeah.
2001. And then you have Christoph Zajac-Denick's character having his own version of Tony from The Shining.
Well, the monolith, I mean, like 2001 is a hugely influential film to us, and I mean, one of maybe my all-time favorite film, and definitely the Dawn of Man sequence with it. The Tony thing was, some people point out, but that's more, that was, so the 2001, that was like more of a direct inspiration. But the Tony thing was more subconscious.
Mm,
Think there's something interesting way to like approach like consciousness through this child, like the
yeah.
development of consciousness, and then it's also such a childlike thing to do, so it just felt there's something both relatable and absurd about that.
Yeah, I was curious about the Tony thing just because there's something else in this film that's associated with the name Tony. So I was curious.
Oh, that is funny. Oh yeah, you're the first person to point that. I never thought about that. It's just a
Yeah.
random coincidence, but maybe subconsciously it was exactly what we were going for.
Yeah. I know we're just about out of time, but I wanted to ask a little bit about the language. And did you get lost in creating the language here, such as when they call on each other or make threatening sounds or go through their nightly rituals?
The language was we tried to keep it pretty simple and also based on even the movement was based on a lot of primate behavior and primate videos as reference. There's some Bigfoot folklore weaved in there with like the tree knocking. That's something that a lot of Bigfoot enthusiasts say that they do. It's a way to talk to each other as they bang on trees and call. Bigfoot or Sasquatch calling is another one. And we based their calls a little bit more on like howler monkeys and how they kind of communicate to each other across distances. We try to, yeah, like we tried to keep just the vocalizations pretty simple and the needs of the characters and what they're trying to communicate to each other are very basic. They're very human needs and desires, and so it made it very easy to come up with that language, and it's also very easy to follow in the film, even though there is no English dialogue. um, it's very clear what the story is. It's very clear what their emotions and what they're trying to say to each other, and how they interact, and their family dynamic is very clear. So, but yeah, the Howling was pretty fun, and then through the process, the Howling also turned into more of a distress and became involved in this whooping thing that they do, became more of distress, and added a lot to some of the more dramatic scenes. It really had like this, to have those high pitched things and then have them do it in like a lower tone just felt very sad and sorrowful, like still distressful and still calling for help, but was able to put a lot of emotion in those vocalizations.
I just found myself paying attention to the rhythm and pattern of things, especially when Jesse's counting. Like started to like really focus and home in on that. So it was
Yeah. Yeah, there was something fun about like from the script stage with David. Script was these kind of you know these creatures that are sort of like the missing link, so they're not as advanced as humans, but they have all these human qualities, but they still have like kind of animal brains trying to process things like infinity, like the stars and rings on a tree. Like it just like counting to something that like that was just kind of like ways to like blow their minds.
right.
Was a good joke.